I like your furry choice there.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Anatoly, can you hear me?
I can hear you just great. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, good. I have a stupid kitty cat avatar, and we're gonna roll with it.
Are you serious?
I can't fix it.
Oh my goodness. Dude, tech session, join.me, go.
No, dude, I kind of like it actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm getting a lot of love.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's a good strategy. I guess we can A/B test it.
I want to see, Ben, how this week went for you. You posted on LinkedIn Pulse, and you talked about the tools that are available for sales teams and how cost effective you think it is. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write that article?
Yeah, so I read Max Altshuler's Hacking Sales book, and it kind of became my Bible. And I explored as many tools that were in there as possible, and then I went out and found some of my old tools, talked to some different sales hackers here. You guys know Jared and Matt, and they were huge helps in terms of even more tools I didn't know existed. And now we sort of have a rudimentary process of tools we're going to use that are not expensive and to help us develop a front end process.
So, how are you iterating? Are you kind of going with an MVP with regards to SalesStack just to kind of see a basic process?
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to do it, and I apologize. I because of all the other work I've been doing this week, I am procrastinating this stuff a little bit. I have my coworker Sabalis on this sales sprint call as well, but this afternoon we're going to be working on all of your paperwork and getting that stuff filled out. I just wanted to get some sort of inbound lead process or an outbound process in place before getting to all this stuff, and I think we're ready to keep going now.
Fabulous. I'm going to get back to that in just a second. Anatoly, how about you? How are you doing this week?
Well, I was traveling. We had a VC meeting in Boston, and then we were meeting with some folks that are important to our cause in DC, and so that basically ate the whole week. But I just received the Predictable Revenue book. Aaron Ross. I got a lot of recommendations about that, so I started reading it. So far so good. Um, we tried a few. So LinkedIn is a really good source of leads for us, and so we've been there are a few automation tools I've been using for LinkedIn to do kind of like general outreach, but we're going to try to do a little bit more surgical outreach there. And so that's been fairly effective. We got a few leads off of that. Some higher level executives in payer and healthcare organizations. That's who we sell to.
Fantastic. So, one of the things we were talking about with this cohort is taking a step back from the tools and looking at process.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing was a baseline with regards to what your current process is, particularly with regards to sales and marketing, this concept of inbound versus outbound. Ben, I know you have a lot to share on the inbound side of the house. I'm just curious, in your opinion, how you differentiate between inbound leads and outbound leads with regards to biz dev.
Yeah, so I mean, and a lot of this knowledge is coming from past experience and those three magic books: the Sales Acceleration Formula, Predictable Revenue, and Sales Hacks. Ideally, we'd have separate them. One person would be on inbound, another person would be on outbound, just because it's a different skill set. It's more like, I mean, obviously you don't, because inbounds are more qualified, you want to handle them a little bit differently. I'm not sure exactly what you're asking.
So it's hard for startups to have a lot of resources to separate between inbound and outbound leads, but they do get treated differently in larger enterprise organizations. So I just wanted to clarify how some people are actually merging inbound and outbound into this sort of wave or stream, but really they come in different channels, if you will. Aaron Ross uses the concept of nets and spears.
And seeds.
And seeds, yeah. Anatoly, tell me a little bit about the difference that you see between inbound and outbound.
I mean, outbound is So inbound, you've got intent. For outbound, you're trying to build intent. And so, when you've got intent for inbound, so people are visiting your website and they've got, they're signing up for your list, they're reaching out, you can have a little bit more educated conversation with them. For outbound, it's more of like an education of the consumer before you get, it's the pre-qual before you get to all the qualification details. I guess, is that what you're kind of asking?
Exactly. It's a different set of qualifications.
Right. And so for us, we're not really getting that like a ton of inbound, although that's starting to increase, because we're engaging with our buyers are at the director and up level. We tend to do more of the outbound sales, and it's all B2B, so it's not it's tougher to reach those guys with like a website. So LinkedIn has been significantly like a significant source of leads for us in that respect.
If I could ask you a question for your inbound, where are you starting with content? Like what are you working on right away? Is it a blog? Is it a webinar you can turn into multiple pieces? Like what do you think is a good start strategy for getting inbound content?
Right. So we've been writing blogs, and we've been tweeting those blogs at some of the thought leaders in our space. And so that helps us get a little bit of kind of that megaphone that people start coming back, and that generates a little bit of inbound. What also has worked nicely is the LinkedIn publishing platform. Okay, again, LinkedIn, it's professional network, right? And so having the LinkedIn platform, publishing there, and then sharing it, and then tweeting that, and then having them already be logged in when they go into that helps us identify who it helps us reach the professionals that we need.
What about topics? Like I did that LinkedIn publish this week, but I didn't want to make it specifically about my industry. I don't really know too much about the industry yet. I know about sales, but this is new. How directly related are your posts to, do you know what I mean? Like, are you selling the product?
No, we're not selling the product. We're selling the vision of a transformed healthcare system. And so we're building a healthcare analytics product, right? And so what we're doing is effectively helping organizations put together these next generation high performance healthcare provider networks, which is basically the future of healthcare in the United States. At least that's what Medicare is doing, and all of the big payers, they're starting to get into that. And so what we're helping organizations do is identify who are going to be the high performance providers for their network, help them engage those providers, and help them build these networks. And so a lot of the work that we do is really talk about how healthcare is changing, what are the traits of a high performance network, what are the traits of the providers in that network, how do you engage with those providers, how would you be able to what does it look like when you're building this network? What does it look like when you're curating and maintaining this network? Things like that. So it's orthogonal to our product, but not about our product.
Got it.
So one of the things I offered in the Dropbox is some templates from HubSpot. And what they try and do is inventory your content and then help you to stage it throughout the sales funnel, commonly called the buyer's journey. And so I'm curious, Christoph, did you get a chance to look at that? I mean, Ben, did you get a chance to look at that?
I read a lot of stuff by HubSpot, so I feel like I probably have read it. Are you talking about just the sample sort of emails that they come up with?
It's more of a catalog of what you have to share, like your blog, any videos, use cases.
I did not read that yet.
Yeah. And the whole point of that was to get startups to understand that content has a life cycle, and that you share that life cycle at different stages, both inbound and outbound as well.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, because one of the tools that Matt and Jared had pointed me towards was outreach. And is that Sounds like, are you familiar? Are you guys familiar with outreach? Yeah, because I know we have the LinkedIn touch versus an email versus a phone call. And the goal with that is to be able to intersparse our content, via both. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Exactly. So we see outreach as a high-powered outbound automation tool to start to identify who you're able to reach within an organization through a series of outbound touches. So an email every, say, 2 to 3 days or 3 to 4 days, commonly called a sequence or cadence. And that comes after you've actually identified your ideal customer profile, which is the topic of next week. Because a lot of people are rushing in our SalesStack team. They're rushing to the tools and they're packing literally, tens of thousands of leads into the top of their funnel. And they're overwhelming their funnel, in my opinion. Because if you get a prospect who picks up the phone and wants a demo, but they're not a good fit for you, well, who's winning? You're certainly not. So our intent is to help you identify this concept of the best person to chat with on the inside. And many people have asked me, who is that? Is that a C-suite? Is it a director or manager, end user? And I think it really varies. My short answer to that, and I'm curious yours, is your inside brand champion. Whoever your internal brand champion can run with your particular value prop, that's who I would target initially. I'm just curious your thoughts, Ben.
Yeah, maybe we haven't figured that out yet. Typically, we target VPs of sales, just because in terms of being able to actually get something done, like when we started regional directors and managers below them, it's a lot less likely we would get the traction that we needed to. Granted, we're dealing with mid to large size businesses, so a regional director in Chobani yogurt is not going to have nearly as much power as a regional director in a much smaller company. So we start with VPs of sales. Sometimes you get pushed down, but generally, that's just where we start, and we'll find champions based on what they tell us.
Perfect. So Nick, I'd like to bring you into the conversation. Sean Daly's asked, can you give some use cases for outreach?
Yeah, sure, I can touch that one. So outreach is basically the process or the opportunity to take one salesperson and make them like 5 or 6 or 9 or 10 or however good you end up being with that tech. But like Chris said, the whole purpose is to fill up that top of that funnel, and we're seeing that as a specialized role as the SDR, the sales development representative. The whole concept with that is get some replies from people. And you want them to reply to your email. Some are going to be bad and some are good, but you're going to try to close a percentage of those deals. If you never talk to a prospect, then you're definitely not going to sell them anything. So getting them to engage, and that's why we're seeing such a rise in account-based marketing right now, and also combining cold outreach with account-based marketing and saying, okay, I'm going to look at who are the players in this account, and let's hit them up with a 3 or 4 email cadence, and we'll talk to all the people that we get a reply from, and we'll get phone numbers for others and call through them. But like Chris said, find your ideal customer and just hammer down on it.
And so Sean Daly is suggesting, do you use outreach specifically for finding out who the decision maker is, or booking appointments?
No, I mean kind of for booking appointments, because one of your calls to actions in your outbound cadence might be book an appointment. So usually what I do on my third touch, if they haven't replied, I just give them a link to my calendar where they can book it themselves, and I say something along the lines of, hey, it looks like you're really slammed. How about I make it easy? Just book a time with me, if you can find a time that fits your schedule. And so, a lot of those convert. It's funny, you see those meetings pop on your calendar and you're like, I thought that was going to be a dead lead. But just by giving them the power, right, instead of saying, hey, can we jump on a call for 5 minutes Tuesday? You get some different response from different people, not everybody.
This concept of cold calling 2.0 is short questions saying, who do you know? Asking for an internal referral. And then you customize that by using some keywords that are particular to their industry. And that's known as semi-automation, when you're staggering these customized but very brief emails. And the whole point is to reach out quickly and introduce your company, your solution, to as many people that fit your ICP, your ideal customer profile. A lot of folks are too broad in their approach, in my opinion. They have too many verticals. So one of the things I'm going to challenge you is to narrow your verticals next week and to list them, not by priority, but just in an order so that you can be really clear with your hypothesis. Is this vertical a good fit for me? Is this point of contact a good fit for me? Is this subject line a good fit? And is this content appropriate at this stage? That's essentially the sales acceleration formula, which Mark Roberge writes, which is come up with a hypothesis and test it. Jason Vargas would say, test it 100 leads at a time, not 5,000 leads at a time. Kyle Porter would suggest go an inch wide and a mile deep. Ben, your thoughts?
Yeah, part of with outreach, one of the questions I had for him, hey, there's only two of us who are sort of working the SDR role right now. So big question for him was how many leads can we handle in the funnel with outreach? Because the way that I see it, 50, and he was saying, well, hey, if you schedule the call portions out every day 2 and you keep putting maybe 50 leads per rep once a day for a couple days, so maybe like a 75 to 100 max per week per rep. Otherwise, there's too many. You get overwhelmed. You won't be able to keep up with the tasks. And that's why we had gotten outreach, was to create, we want a plug and play system for SDRs that come in. Hey, you already have sequences built out, funnel in some of your leads, run them with these sequences. Your job is already sort of automated for you and already set up. Just a very scalable process with outreach.
Can I ask a question? So Ben, do you have do you feel like you have a product market fit already for your product?
Oh yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So could this cold calling 2.0 or the sale acceleration formula, could that be used to maybe find the product market fit? So I'm thinking that there could be an opportunity to use it for the horizontal approach, but then where you're seeing more traction, start into that vertical and focus on that vertical a little bit more.
Process. You're talking about customer development, and in my opinion, you're asking completely different questions. So I think it's important to clarify and not blur the two types of outbound approaches.
I totally agree with that. I think that there's a big difference. Geez, 1 second. Hey, go ahead, Chris. I got to step away for just a quick second.
Okay, Ben, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't see outreach as being that kind of tool. But it's got a bunch of different uses for us. As soon as I saw the tool and how it worked, all I could focus on was this is an easily scalable and repeatable process for SDRs. They come in, they sit down, they run through these sequences. In terms of product, I mean, it can act, if you're asking, we're probably going to use it over a MailChimp now too for email drip marketing campaigns to different segments to see what kind of traction we can get. But that's just how I saw outreach.
Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
that's basically what I was saying. I mean, you may have, our product, my product is fairly, it's fairly applicable in a lot of other circumstances. I mean, we have a fairly generic product. So one of the things that, it's very healthcare focused, but within that, it's a very large industry. And so within that, we already found traction in a few verticals. And so the big challenge for us, which we've been challenged by a lot of folks, is you could sell a bunch of different verticals, but is there going to be a golden vertical for you where you're going to be able to get a lot more traction and a lot faster? And so that's basically a measured approach using something like outreach, but I'm not just saying, something like that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Because with outreach, you could set up a sequence for dentists, a sequence for pediatricians, a sequence for the different healthcare professionals, and let them sort of run while you're focusing maybe on one with a manual process where you're actually calling every so often as well. Yeah, I think that would make sense. I mean, Chris, Nick, you probably used it more than I have.
I think, yeah, you can certainly use it for different verticals at the same time, but one of the kind of tried and true rules is to try to keep one SDR on one vertical or as close as you can. just because you end up getting with much better results. And one thing that I wanted to mention just about that comment earlier before I had to run for a second was just the fact that the outreach is going to scale whatever you're doing. So if you have product market fit, then you're going to get a lot more meetings and a lot more sales. And if you don't, then you're going to be able to fail faster. So I wouldn't look at it as a channel to get to try to find product market fit, but it is one way to sort of test it. I think it's better to get that market fit before you put in a lot of resources and time into the sales acceleration model. Otherwise, you're just going to lose everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the concept there is nail it, then scale it. So if you're in a product market phase, then your content, your outbound questions will be different, and you'll probably not need so many leads, quite honestly, because you're building a different type of relationship. But you can still use outreach to sequence, if you will, and start to find out what kinds of pain points you're solving for certain people, test the different verticals, certainly. I want to reiterate what Alex Turner has basically taught me, which is first come up with a plan. Create your set of goals, and then execute that plan without deviating, and finally just measure the results. And that's a template that you can repeat over and over again, so you can compare the results in a common fashion. I think a lot of sales teams lack a true process, and they improvise, but that doesn't help you to measure what's most effective. So we have a couple guys from outreach in our Slack team, and we'll be able to have them on this show when we do what we call our top of the funnel sprint 2, which is more the implementation. It's really critical to get your ICP figured out, which is the topic of next week's conversation. And we're going to take a close look at what Max Altshuler and Daniel Barber published this week with regards to how to go about evaluating and identifying the ICP, particularly in comparison with the total market available. If you have a strong ICP but a small market, that might not be a good fit for you. So you have to look at those two variables together. The other thing that I wanted to chat with about is this concept of an SQL. It's pretty controversial. And the reason I wanted to mention it is because there's a lot of handoffs that are happening with a very light qualification. And there's a very weak discovery process. And I think that it's kind of a challenge because you miss opportunities when you don't discover properly. And then you also are not meeting the right needs of your customer because if you don't really know you're talking to the right customer. So I'm curious, did you guys take a look at the SQL map that I put up in Dropbox at all?
Again, I procrastinated a lot this week. That was my plan this afternoon.
No problem. I'm so glad that you guys are here. You're showing up. I want you to take a look at that map over the weekend and tailor it to meet your own qualification process. And consider that one of the pages of your playbook, if you will, and tweak it over time, but measure the results. I don't think that sales teams have spent enough time thinking about when to hand off, if you will, a lead to the AE. And what kind of information that AE needs to know. This concept of BANT, budget, authority, need, timing, has been basically reinvented several ways. And Alex Turner introduced me to the concept of ANAM, with authority being the number one. The authority is essentially the decision maker, hopefully your brand champion, who is then meeting with the other decision makers. Because I know, Anatoly, in your case, you probably have a very complex decision-making team on the other side. Do you want to talk about how deals are evaluated by your customers?
Right, absolutely. So it helps to engage with the strategic owner of building these networks, and then they usually call in analysts and business analysts and maybe sales representatives on their end, because at the end of the day, network building is kind of like a sales activity. And then we usually have a short demo period, let's say like 7 days, during which time they explore the application, they ask us questions. There might be a post demo kind of like sync up. Well, there's always a post demo sync up, and we talk then about how is it serving their needs, and is there going to be a gap between what we have and what they need, at which point we kind of figure out, is there a timeline that we can resolve that gap? Can they go with what we have right now? But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty lengthy process. Just I'm thinking about at least a month-long sales cycle, but probably longer.
Okay, so how are you scoring that process, if you will, as it goes through the funnel? And also, where do you think it might start to hang up? Do you have a scoring system at all?
Nope. No,
Okay.
I'm very much in the learning stages of this. I come from a technical background, so I can build this stuff, but I'm learning how to sell. But where it hangs up is it's really the sophistication of those that are evaluating it. So the strategic owner is usually not the one that's evaluating the product, right? It's he has a team, or she has a team, and her team is actually evaluating it. So based on time requirements, based on their availability, sometimes they gets hung up. Sometimes they get brought in without additional context from their boss, and so then we have to provide a lot of context. Generally, there's a lot of hand holding and support, and so that's been really effective for us. But yeah, it's at the end of the day, I think that our champion is really the guy who has the strategic responsibility, but they really need buy-in from their team in order to actually pull the trigger.
Perfect. Ben, how about you? I know you're ramping up one, maybe two SDRs. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm an SDR, and then Sabalos, who's also on the stack with me.
And then, are you passing these leads to anybody else, or are you serving as the AE as well?
Nope. So we have one of our co-founders, and we have someone else who has a lot of industry experience. So it just happened that one of our co-founders was a really good sales guy. So it works out that we can separate the front end versus the back end, and that helps me a lot more not worry so much about the back end, and that means I can have a much better front end. So that has been an advantage.
And what kind of information are you passing?
Yep. So I came up with a list of discovery questions. It's really just we kind of quiz them on the first call, and that's really much it. We're asking questions that are pointed towards the three main value drivers that we offer, and then at the end of the call, we validate to them, okay, based on your answers here, this, and this, and then we relay to the AE, hey, here, based on our answers, here are the areas you guys should hit with your demo and the value drivers. This is what's important to them.
And are you using a narrative or a scoring process?
Not yet.
Okay.
We're basically the narrative. We have HubSpot, and we'll put in like a summary in there. We created a field for that, and they'll just read that before a call. We're transitioning away from, like, right now we're still doing where the SDR does an introduction on that call and gives them kind of a brief overview, but we want to get it so where they're completely separated.
And do you feel like the handoff is effective, that not only are they addressing pain points, but also any objections that might have been identified early on in the SDR conversation?
Yeah, I mean, we're still really early into it.
Looks like Ben might have some IT problems here. Anatoly, do you want to talk about maybe what it's like? Oh, are you back, Ben?
Back.
Yeah, I'm here.
So you're early into it, and so you feel like you can probably just step across the room maybe and answer questions. But I'm just curious if you're getting feedback from your AEs with regards to information that they're wanting more from that initial contact.
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, all the time. But I mean, that's why it's sort of an evolving process where, again, they're going to say, hey, we needed this piece. Okay, cool. Now we know to add that in And then we're finding, maybe we collected this piece of information based on this question, but it's totally unnecessary. So let's take that out. So that's a huge part of evolving the process, is getting their feedback. I wouldn't be able to get a good front end without the back end feedback.
Perfect. And are you documenting that anywhere?
Yes. We have that free HubSpot CRM. I'm trying to get in the process of documenting everything.
When I say document, are you creating like a Wikipedia or some kind of a wiki for your playbook?
So HubSpot has a shared document library, and that's sort of where we're putting things like templates for SDR questions, sales process information, the sales matrix that we've built, all that kind of stuff. Is that what you mean?
Yes, perfect. I didn't know that. Could you add a link in the chat bar here to the sales library that HubSpot offers?
Sure. So I think you may have to get their Sidekick for Business tool. But once you get, because I think that's what it is. The CRM is free, but then you pay $50 a month for the Sidekick for Business, and then you get the document library. Let me see if I can find it.
Anatoly, what are you using to track your conversations?
Well, we're trying the same HubSpot CRM, but we've tried Base CRM as well. We had an SDR that we were kind of testing out, and he did, he was really effective at getting in touch with people. Not so effective at qualifying when he passed them to us. But refused to use CRMs, so that's not going to work out. So we're kind of figuring that out. We're actually just starting our journey. We're getting through kind of like a big pilot with a very large customer for a very for significant revenue, we're finalizing the product, at least for that vertical, and that's why I'm actually in the SalesStack, because I think that. So basically, in the next few weeks, we'll be staffing up and starting to really roll out the sales outreach. So I'm trying to learn as much as I can, so we can kind of start off right.
Perfect. So are you leading the sales team right now? It sounds like you're initiating conversations.
It's between myself and my co-founder, but I mostly own the product, but I just want to be knowledgeable about the sales process, so I can be useful in any shape, way, or form. My role is usually on the account executive side, not on the SDR side. So I need to understand how the SDR and the AE interrelate, so I can make good decisions about hiring those folks.
And have you started documenting an SDR process?
Very, very briefly, but not a whole lot. And mostly I'm doing it in Slack posts in our sales channel. But I think we're going to have to formalize it a little bit more.
Excellent. Yeah, I think the SDR is a very powerful role with regards to the discovery process. And the more consistent that process is, then I think the better prepared you are as the AE to engage the prospect, because there's a common set of questions that have been answered, and then they've also been prepared for the next round of questions.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I see it is that in programming, there's like this idea called loose coupling of components. So basically, you build like interfaces between components, and components can change, but as long as the interface stays the same, it doesn't matter, right? And so, like, the way that I see it is the SDR and the AE are actually different components, and the interface between them is the communication. And so, you can scale individual, you can scale SDRs and you can scale the AEs based on what you need, really the interface between them is really the documentation that you're talking about. So I'm kind of I'm kind of approaching it from that point of view. But yeah, it's exactly what you said.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, especially because it sounds like you're working in a distributed environment.
That's right. You got it.
So Alex Turner asks, he'd like a little feedback on the HubSpot CRM. Ben, I think you might be able to chat a little bit more about that.
Yeah, Anatoly, you're using it too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, my feedback when I saw the thing, I just blown away. I love it. It's just so easy to use. I feel like it was more designed for a sales guy. When my CEO started playing around with the pipeline, I don't know if you're familiar with Trello, but you can set the pipeline up so it's much like Trello. And he loved that. Like he literally said, "This is so cool. I'm glad that we have this." When you have the Sidekick for Business, which is like it's kind of when you want to pay for it, the $50 a month, you get call tracking. It'll record phone calls. It'll do the document library. It's pretty inexpensive, and it does everything that we've needed it to do, and it's really easy to use.
Fantastic. And
Problem is though, it won't hook up with things like Outreach because of the competitive nature of the rest of HubSpot's products.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a really clean UI. Previously, a friend of mine is Stelly FT. He's founder of Closio, and so I used Closio for a while, and I think that's probably the best CRM that I've used. It's at this point we need to get into the kind of the cadence of using a CRM on a regular basis, and then I think at the end of the day, once we kind of understand what the split of responsibilities between the SDRs and AEs and the process between that, we'll probably end up upgrading to Closio because I really like their call integration features. I think that's really a powerful thing, and I like it. I like Stelly a lot, so supporting friends is a good thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
Stelly's been a champion for.
I think they have an awesome tool. It was just in terms of budget wise, it was a little more than we wanted to spend.
That's right. Yeah, we also used Base for a while, and Base was okay. It wasn't that great. I think that they overcomplicated a lot of the Bases. I think is designed for maybe a little bit more sophisticated sales process, and they kind of prescribe as opposed to recommend. And so the prescription part of it was really tough for me to kind of grasp because I don't necessarily think that everyone's sales process is going to look the same way.
Yeah, I mean, Base has click to call, which is nice, but if you're using Outreach on the front end, and just so you guys know what I do with it, I start there at top of the funnel with Outreach, and they don't even get into the CRM if they're not some sort of an interested customer. So yeah, there's only Salesforce integration right now, and no Zapier one yet, which I think when they do that one will be great. That keeps a lot of that non-interested, not the right target, didn't respond to your message, opted out, gets a lot of that removed and doesn't clutter up your CRM so much.
Mm-hmm. I like it.
So one of the challenges that people face is how to find new leads. I hear this a lot. They load the top of the funnel, especially small sales organizations, and then the next week there's nothing new coming in the pipe. Ben, how are you addressing one of these challenges, and what are the things that you're considering right now?
So Matt really is a genius with everything LinkedIn. Matt Ekstrom, I don't know if he's in the chat now, but he pointed me in the direction of the LinkedIn tool, which is incredibly inexpensive. It's like $39 a month. We have LinkedIn Navigator. It works better when you have the advanced search features. So with LinkedIn Navigator, I think that's $79 a month. We do very specific searches for industry, title, for company. I'd like to have a revenue filter, but the closest we can get is employee size. So we do like 51 to 1,000 employees. Once we do the search in LinkedIn Navigator, $39 a month, pull up the LinkedIn tool. It scrapes first name, last name, company information, where they are. It scrapes everything into a nice, easy to understand Excel sheet. That's how we're sort of getting our initial set of leads. Then we're going to segment, and we can segment using the Navigator tool. Once we have the leads, well, right now we're looking at hiring a virtual assistant in the Philippines for a couple bucks an hour, and then one by one going through, because it extracts all the links as well. So one by one, they'll go through every link and use a tool called Profit, which will find, a 75% chance it finds a solid email address, and then they just copy and paste that Excel sheet, and then we have the list of LinkedIn scrape leads with emails.
And then what are you using to verify the email? Is that Profit?
So no, Profit will find it, and usually it tells you if it's verified or unverified below it, like, hey, thumbs up or thumbs down. In addition to that, Matt had recommended kickbox.io, mass mail import, I guess.
Could you drop a few of those links into the chat bar, particularly Kickbox.io? It's something that Matt and I talked about, and I think it's a really good way to keep your reputation from declining before you start doing a massive outbound. Anatoly, are these tools new to you, this process of data enrichment and data quality?
I mean, not really. So my product is actually a super comprehensive database of every healthcare provider in the United States. So we have about 1 million physicians plus 2.3 million mid-level people, executives for pretty much every healthcare organization in the United States, and for most of them, emails and web addresses. So we use our database. What we don't have is the corporate hierarchy, and for that we use LinkedIn. I used a product called, so I tried something interesting a few weeks ago. I used a product called LinkedIn Autopilot, which what it does is basically you go to search, you segment your search by industry, let's say hospitals, and then you say second level connections. But you should probably have an enhanced LinkedIn account for this, because you can only see like 100 profiles otherwise. And so once you have that, Autopilot, actually what it does is it goes and it visits all of those guys. And then so LinkedIn is one of those platforms where you know who visits you. And so they visit you back, and the conversion rate is probably 20% or something like that, maybe sometimes even higher. And so then I changed so each of us did this for a different vertical. And mine was healthcare, like ACOs, like accountable care organizations. And so I changed my profile to be effectively a pitch for clairvoyance after a little blurb about myself. And so there were like screenshots and all of that stuff. So it's basically a click through. Connect, that was probably, I think, in around like 10%. And so when we got the 10%, those were like inbound leads effectively for us. So instead of using the website to do that, we've been using LinkedIn to do that.
So I'm really curious because I liked Autopilot a lot. I didn't know if it made sense to have Outreach and Autopilot, because I don't know, that seems like they do some of the same things. How else are you using Autopilot?
I'm not using Autopilot. I'm sorry, Outreach. I'm not using Outreach. How I'm using Autopilot is that. So when I go and I check them out, they look at me. They look at my profile. Who is this guy? And the way that I look for these guys is that they're in the industry which I'm targeting using my profile, and at the same time they're an executive. And however you do that. So like sometimes they use like data analytics. Or sometimes, I segment by role or something like that. So we've been trying different things. But I think it's the profile that really speaks to the value proposition for that sector that ends up having them link in with me. And once they link in with me, I can get their details, and those become essentially prospects for us.
Very cool.
So that's kind of like one way of automating that. And by the way, if you do that and you use Pulse for publishing, that helps you kind of get reach for your blogs as well.
Could you put a link to the Autopilot by any chance into the chat box?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I definitely want to try that.
Yeah, try it out. I mean, it's the Autopilot tool is laughably inexpensive. I think it's like $20 a month.
Sure. So I mean, just so you guys know, if you can ever afford it, if you can grab a tool like Datanyze, can save all of that manual process and just build lists super fast. And you get all the information. You might have direct dials, and same sort of thing for account-based marketing, and companies like Discovery.org, who's going to give you the structure and direct dials for all the people. That's high-level stuff. It's expensive, but oh my gosh, does it save you so much time.
I was gonna say, because I loved Datanyze. I looked at that all earlier this week. It was too expensive for us right now, but the LinkedIn scraping thing that they do and the research is really cool. I personally think Discover.org is even cooler, but we're looking for sales targets. They only have marketing, finance, and IT professionals in the database right now, or else I would have loved Discover.org. I think it's an awesome database.
Yeah, we have Discover.org in our backyard. So those guys are transitioning. They just did a big raise. And we're looking forward to some new verticals from them as soon as they can round out their hiring process. I'm going to ask you guys to help me as we move through to the third week of this sprint, which is where we look at the list building tools. And I'm going to actually chat with you individually about how you've approached a cost benefit analysis, because I think it's difficult with regards to the cost, the quality, and then the time that you spend with regards to enrichment. Datanyze may be a premier platform, but I don't think any of us can rationalize the expense right now. So Anatoly, you've come up with some great solutions, and I'm just curious if you have a matrix that you use to help evaluate additional solutions with regards to time. And maybe we can bounce a few ideas so I can build that in Excel and share that with everybody else in the cohort as they start to go through the many different tools. There's easily 20 different tools out there.
Right.
But
I don't think it really matters what the cost is or what the time is. If you get a tool that you put $1 in and you get $1.10 out, that's a good tool. If you get a tool that you put $1 in and you get $2 out, that's a great tool. And so I think tracking conversions or tracking whatever like the metrics are, that's the only way I think you can look at it. So Datanyze, I have no idea how much it costs. Let's say it costs $1,000. Each of my sales, let's say, is about $3,000 to $5,000 per month. If I can close 2 additional sales, I'll fucking buy it all day long.
Right.
And that's the only way that I can look at it. Time wise, obviously there's like a limited time. So a lot of these tools, and what we've noticed is the shorter the time that we provide a free demo, the better the conversion rate is. So yeah, well, it's just like if you have people look at it for too long, they get bored, and then like it's not fresh in their minds. In fact, they only check it out probably 1 or 2 times, like maybe a handful of times. And it's probably in the beginning. And so what's the point of having a 30-day trial period if they only check it out in the first 7 days?
Well, and Anatoly, have you used Odesk?
I have used Odesk, not for this particular thing, but what about it?
So the idea was, and that's why I worked with Matt Ekstrom was how can we get the same quality and capabilities of a Datanyze, but not pay nearly as much? And essentially, it's just breaking it down into 2 different cheaper tools, the LinkedIn scraper and then like a capture or a profit. And then I have that guy for $3 an hour go through every single individual LinkedIn profile. It's tedious, it's annoying, but it's $3 an hour. It takes him 3 hours to do 600 of them. And then we have 600 leads, and it's less than $100 for 600 leads. So in the end, just the expense was trying to get the same, and that's the hacking, I guess, from the hacking sales book, is trying to get the same sort of quality, but for a much lesser price.
Yeah, I mean, we've used Mechanical Turk for the same thing. Component that does entity resolution, basically like matching the same guy across multiple data sources. And so we were to use like Mechanical Turk for after deterministic matching, after probabilistic matching at several thresholds, we triage it in Mechanical Turk. And so we already kind of have like an idea of how to do that. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that there's some intelligence behind the tool that's more sophisticated than the simple processes that you might be able to get from $3 an hour at Odesk. And so that's the only thing I would consider is like there could be some machine learning capabilities that they use to match people and profiles up that might provide better data at the end of the day than a person who does it for $3 an hour. And so you have to calculate kind of like what is the this is a hypothesis. We do have some of those capabilities, and so I offer that as a counterpoint to some organizations that say, well, we can build this in-house in like a year. Like, yeah, you can build it in-house for a year, but imagine where we will be in a year.
So Anatoly, I'm just curious, are you tracking your expense with related to all these different tools and VAs? Is that something that's important to you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm still, we have to be, we have a fiduciary responsibility to do things in a way that's, that's reasonable and not too expensive. But at the same time, like, I think developing product and developing customers is a lot more important than worrying about an extra $1,000 for a product a month. And I think that, our investors and people who we talk to, I mean, our mentors, they understand that. And I think that there's a lot of flexibility in your tool choice if you decide. I mean, look, it's marginal expense. In other words, of course, it depends how big your market is, lifetime value is. But if you charge enough for your product, that cost should be fairly incidental to the overall picture, to the overall
Correct.
health of your finances.
Correct. I think you have a product that supports that. I would just be curious if you were able to roll that up and to suggest that, a warm lead cost you X amount of dollars, because there are companies out there that are essentially outsourced SDRs.
Right.
Very, very expensive.
Closio actually started as outsourced SDRs. Yeah, it's very expensive. And I would be really worried about two things there. One is how good their bench is, because outsourced SDRs, like, you're not always going to get the same people all the time. And so it's extremely important that they have an internal process that gets them to be basically the same baseline quality. And if they don't have like a good bench, then one guy leaves, and then you get like a person who's fairly new, and you don't get the same quality out of them, but you still pay the same amount of money. And the second thing is, are they going to be, most likely they're not going to be exclusively on your account. Are they going to be able to, it's actually very similar to what Nick said about the SDRs being on the same vertical, right? And so imagine if your SDRs are not even on the same vertical, they're not even on the same product. Imagine how good the quality is going to be there. We're looking into that, but I think the future of our product is to bring all of that in-house and to really kind of understand the process. I won't be leading it. I need to understand it. And so that's why I'm here.
Perfect. Okay, I would agree with you completely. And so I was just curious, maybe we can round later to get a benchmark of what you're able to do in-house versus outsource, just so that others know the value of building an in-house process. I think what I'm seeing is a lot of people doing it on the cheap and getting low quality, and then looking at these outsourced, again, low quality. And so echoing your sentiment is build your own process, get as high quality as you possibly can, and then you're in a much better position to leverage that and make a lot more money.
Yeah, I mean, like, you're building a product, right? Are you going to build a shitty product and then make it better? Or are you going to try to build a good product, and then you can always decrease the quality over time, but increasing quality over time is it's a little more difficult, especially once you get some level of scale, because at some level of scale, it's going to be more and more difficult. It's going to be exponentially more difficult the more scale you get to a better position in terms of your sales and stuff like that. I may not know a whole lot about it also, so grain of salt for everything I say, always.
No, scaling is really the challenge, because that's where the quality, even with a process, starts to decline, and you're not able to measure the change in quality because you're moving too quickly, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's definitely been my experience. That's why I'm kind of, I want to own something, understand it before I can outsource it. Outsourcing before understanding, it's like, are you going to get consultants to build your product? Are you going to try to get a CTO to build your product in-house, right? Every single company I've seen build a house outsourced has not worked out.
Oh, 100%.
I agree with that. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Cool.
And there's a very big difference in the quality of the list that each person in the organization can build. And so, of course, at first you want the founders doing that outreach, but it really comes down to, like you said, like the profile. You tailor your social media profile in order to appeal to that vertical that you're drilling down into. And that is so important. But also, if you outsource it, you miss these things like, oh, I went to Stanford, they went to Stanford, I'm going to write that note in the intro of one of my templates, so that I can find some way to connect with them. And more often than not, those human connections that you make with somebody make all the difference between whether you close that deal or not.
It's the only difference. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have to like understand and like you. I mean, your effect, it's like, if your product is so super self-service, that maybe it's not as important. But if your product is a pretty hands-on product, I can't imagine doing that without doing it myself, or at least in-house, so I can understand how the process is working out.
Quick tip. I just popped in my head, and it kind of goes along with LinkedIn and just helping to use the founders. Part of what Sabalas here had done for a little while was use our CEO's LinkedIn and would connect with people that, you know that trick. It works so well because it's like, hey, it's not just some random salesperson reaching out to me. It's a CEO of a company. I'm more inclined to listen.
Along those lines, my co-founder is a doctor, and we're able to get to the C-level of any hospital in the United States. If you're selling a healthcare product and you don't have an advisor or a co-founder who's a doctor, it's going to be tough. That's what it is. And so I guess it's the same thing, right? So I think like if you're doing something that's like a Me Too thing, then maybe that's not as important. But a lot of the products that are kind of innovative and I hate to use the word like thought leader, like you're kind of like doing something that's fairly disruptive or very new. A lot of the sales that we've had to do at this point, at several companies that I've had to do, has been more of the evangelism and thought leadership sale. And you need to have bona fides to do that. So like you can't be outsourced and you can't be just like a dude who doesn't understand the industry. And so thought leadership is like not just understand the industry, but have insights that others may find value. And it goes back to like the LinkedIn and content marketing, right? If you publish if your product is sufficiently innovative and you publish like thought-provoking pieces about the future state of your industry as you see it, then I think that's going to be a fairly effective way to establish a foothold.
Totally. And Chris and I have been talking so much about the challenger sale lately, and I think when you're in that position, that sort of selling technique is multiplied, by a magnitude.
And a lot of it is evergreen content too. So, it's not going to be like it's not going to be for today only. It's going to be, the way that the healthcare system, again, only healthcare, right? So the way that the healthcare system is changing, that's going to be happening for the next 10 years. And so you can look back. I've looked back at thought leaders in my industry 3-4 years ago, what they wrote, and it's prescient, like it's talking about what's happening now and hasn't even happened, but you can see it happening. And so that content is gold, right? And so if you can write more stuff like that and you can be like that type of a person, I think it's a really good. And then you get, obviously if you do enough of that, you get to speak on panels, you get to speak in conferences. That helps you increase your profile. You get to meet people who are, influential in your industry. They start to become megaphones for you if they get what you're doing. And that's like those multipliers as well. But we're talking about the net, right, of Aaron Ross, not necessarily the spear, but still, I mean, to me, that's really important.
I think of that effectively as sharpening the spear.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I have to log off. I'm sorry, guys. Great chat.
Thank you, Anatoly.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Hey, Ben.
Yeah.
Before we wrap this up, are you guys considered disruptors in your industry?
Oh, definitely.
And what kind of reception are you getting from those who are managing these very large grocery chains? Are they seeing that this is the time? Do you feel like you're maybe too soon, or what's the response been?
And I'm not used to this because I came from marketing automation sales, PPC, SEO sales, and display advertising. And I'm coming into this industry where guys are still carrying around binders full of papers that they're making checkbox on when they're going into stores. So the dinosaurs in the industry are not, it's kind of like dragging them kicking and screaming. We are not at them yet, but sort of the younger mid-level guys. So we're the younger mid-level guys. I'm going to actually bring in Sabalas here. Let him give his perspective. Hold on a second.
Hi guys. So, how you doing? In the industry, I mean, Ben's spot on. A lot of people are still carrying around binders, notebooks, and a lot of things when trying to collect data for the entire sales process in general. So we definitely are considered disruptors. We think right now is the right time simply because there are companies that are starting to take notice that they do need some sort of centralized platform to keep track of everything in the sales process, from their reps activity all the way up to, the execs and what they're wanting to see. There are a few, there's a lot of different players and like probably 3 or 4 different tiers of people that we're talking to, depending on exactly what their priorities are. But we've already had conversations with a few, and also have heard about conversations of others, of people saying, yeah, we definitely need this. We need some sort of system. We've heard of enterprises trying to develop something internally to do so. So we feel that it's the right time to get it right now, while the industry is starting to realize what they need. So it hasn't become a full realization yet for them, but it's starting, and we're trying to get on right now while everything is building that momentum.
And what does your initial offering look like? Do you have a kind of a scaled down version so that people can do a small implementation to start?
You're right. Yeah. So the first version of what we have right now is more of a scaled down version. We're able to work with companies if they want to, if we want to do an early pilot. At this point, basically the partnerships and the relationships are a little bit more important to us than necessary revenue. Moving forward, we already have tentative dates for the release of the other features of the product. So probably within the next 6 to 12 months, the full functionality of everything should be incorporated into the app. And that's going to be where, of course, the game changer is. But right now it's at that basic functionality where it's, good enough to, have those conversations, but also basic enough where implementation isn't as thorough.
Fantastic. One of the members in the audience is referencing the work they do with grocery stores. I think they might be interested in learning more about your product. Could you put that in the chat bar down there?
Yeah, definitely.
Nick, we are just about at time here. Did you want to wrap this up with any kind of common threads or themes that you noticed?
I thought everybody offered a lot of great advice. And, for anybody tuning in that's just thinking about starting some sort of outbound campaigns or cold outreach campaigns, hearing about these tools from these guys, you got a leg up. And one tool that they mentioned earlier was the LinkedIn tool, I think is what it used to be called. Now it's called like the sales tool or LinkedIn sales tool, something like that. But that is the first step to sort of throwing those spears out, in my opinion, these days for a B2B sale. So if you're trying to scale up and you want to throw a lot of spears, you need to make sure that there's some people down there. You don't want to just throw them into some empty ground. But with that LinkedIn, being able to increase your first degree connections very quickly, being able to send very personalized intros, as well as build some lists in there. So whether you're using that or a Datanyze or you're doing some web scraping, you're all verifying it. But that is just light years above what most people are doing right now.
Exactly. And I'd like to add that next week, we're going to start really pinpointing the ideal customer profile and try to target specific individuals in a specific vertical and to test a hypothesis whether or not that is the best vertical for your product. I'm going to load an article by Max Altschuler and Dan Barber published this week. Ben, you might have seen it, and build a matrix for evaluating the ICP, and I'll load that to Dropbox over the weekend. Ben, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off today?
Read the books. The 3 books that I feel like are the core of my knowledge: the Sales Acceleration Formula, Predictable Revenue, and Hacking Sales.
Amen. +1, you guys. Really appreciate your time today. I love that we're cohort is sprinting through this. We've got 2 more weeks to go. I'll see you in the channel and see you in Dropbox.
Hope you guys are feeling good and you're feline good there, Chris. Talk to you next time.
This is really helpful. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Cheers.